So our next lesson is going to cover finding standard deviation. And on the right-hand side, you may notice the top formula is the formula for mean. This is the way it is listed on the AP formula sheet. The bottom one is the one that's right under it. That is going to be our formula for the standard deviation. And I'm sorry to say that the standard deviation, finding it by hand is, it's not the most fun thing that we do in this class. However, it's necessary for you to be able to find it by hand, so that when we actually talk about it and we think about what it means, then you'll understand the basics behind it. So whenever you find the standard deviation, the first thing you always need to do is find the mean. And you actually already did that back in example number 1. You found that the mean was 19.888 or 19.89. So that's the first thing that you need. And if you look at that formula, that is one of the variables in it. It's the one I just underlined. Our second important variable is our n, which is the number of values that we have. And that's going to be 9. So now, that's this one right here. The other thing in there, the xi, is actually going to be each of these 9 things that we have here. And we are actually going to take a sum. So I'm going to kind of take this formula. We're going to ignore the square root for now. And we're going to ignore the 1 over n minus 1 for now. And we're going to look at this part right here. We have this sum part in the middle. And in this sum part, they ask you to find the sum of all of the xi's minus the mean, which is, and then we square it, then the mean is 19.89. So I'm going to just write this as xi minus 19.89 squared. So then from there, what we're going to do is we're going to take every single one of these 9 values that we have. We're actually going to subtract the mean from it. The reason we want to subtract the mean from it is because we want to find out how far it is away from the mean. Then we're going to square it, and the purpose of squaring it is because you're going to have some negative values, some positive values, but if we square them all and then add them all up and then take the square root, then it won't actually matter what the signs are. Then we'll have the exact distance away from the mean. So for our first value here, we are going to do 9 minus 19.89 squared. And then remember, this means the sum. This is sigma notation. And so then we're going to add to that 14 minus 19.89 squared, and we keep on doing this with all of the values. And we generally only do this once throughout the year. The reason we only do it once is because it does get very, very, very tedious, and also it's really easy to make a mistake. So the main reason that I want you to be able to do this is because I kind of want you to understand what's happening when we calculate the standard deviation. But actually the secondary reason that I want you to be able to do this is because sometimes in college, they actually, when you take a stats class, they will require that you do this by hand. They won't let you use a calculator all the time. So just make sure you kind of have an idea behind it and make sure you understand how to use the formula. So from here, we're going to subtract these all out, square them, add them up. So if you want, you can feel free to go back and check my work, but you do not have to unless you really, really want to do that. There is one thing I do want to point out, and first of all, we have a long way to go still. But the other thing that's important to know is a key term. You are technically not required to know it, but it's a good idea to make sure you know it. So each of these values, like the negative 10.89, which I got from doing 9 minus 19.89, each of those values, so this one, which gave me an answer of that, these are what we call a deviation. So in this case, the deviation is the distance from the mean. The standard deviation is the standardized distance from the mean for all of the values. So that's what we're doing, is we're finding the distance from the mean for every single value. So I'll go ahead and calculate these out. You can feel free to do it on your own calculator if you want to, or I'll forgive you if you don't want to do it on your own and you can just watch when I do it. So when I add all these up together, I end up getting 396.89. And so this value right here is the value of the sum under the square root. I'm almost done, actually. I don't have a long way to go. So I just have a few more little things to do now. So now what I need to do is figure out what this part under the square root is. And so I'm going to do 1 over n, which is 9, minus 1, times 396.89. That gives me 1 over 8 times 396.89. And when I do that, I end up getting 49.61. So before I continue on, I do want to mention one small thing, and that is that the value under the square root, the 1 over n minus 1, times the summation that we did, this is what we call the variance. So that, just kind of keep that in the back of your mind. You see that word mentioned again. So in this case, our variance is 49.61. And so finally, in the end, in order to find our standard deviation, which you'll see me usually abbreviate as SD, I'm going to take the square root of my variance, which I tend to abbreviate as VAR, and I end up getting the final answer of approximately 7.0435. So one happy note is that there's actually a really quick way to do this on the calculator, and that's what we're going to be using from now on. But I did want you to see how we calculated the standard deviation.